In the introduction to his 1974 New York Times bestseller Working, author, historian, and broadcaster Studs Terkel wrote, "Work is about a search for daily meaning, as well as daily bread. For recognition, as well as cash. For astonishment, rather than torpor. In short, for a sort of life, rather than a Monday through Friday sort of dying." 45 years later, after Watergate, the end of the Cold War, and the dawn of the information age, so much about work has changed, but the search for meaning remains. In 2017, Better Up Labs surveyed 2,285 American professionals across 26 industries. They found that on average, employees say their work is about half as meaningful as it could be. Meaning is so important that 9 out of 10 respondents said that they trade money for meaning. On the flip side, the survey also showed that employees who find their work highly meaningful stay at jobs for an average of 7.4 months longer than employees who find work lacking meaning. When managers find jobs highly meaningful, turnover rates plummet to 1.5%, less than half the national average. How can you tap into the power of meaning to drive great outcomes for your organization? Today, on the Season 2 finale of the Internal Comms Procast, we welcome organizational psychologist Lewis Garrad. Lewis will share why meaningful work matters and how leaders and communicators can build a culture of meaning at any organization.
So people find meaning in different ways. It's very personal, but of course, work and the stories that we associate with work is an important way, at least in the modern era, that a lot of people experience meaning.
Stay tuned. Circle is proud to sponsor the Internal Comms Procast. Circle helps internal communicators evolve from order taker to trusted strategist with their suite of easy-to-use tools. Circle's automated email creates, personalizes, and sends your staff newsletter. With Circle, internal communicators can spend less time copying and pasting and more time engaging and understanding their audience. Greatness awaits. Request a demo at circle.com. That's CERKL.com. Welcome to the Internal Comms Procast. I am your host, Barry Williams. I am excited to introduce you to today's guest.
My name is Lewis Garrad, and I work in the people science team for Mercer. So I am an organizational psychologist. I study people at work, find out what makes them tick, and find out how to enable them to really bring their full selves to work. As a teenager, I was a bit of a maths and science geek, I guess. I was a bit of a dork, one of those guys who loves his like D&D, that kind of thing. And when I was approaching university, I decided that actually people was the thing I didn't really understand, and so I should study them. I did a cognitive neuroscience degree, and then I ended up going into a master's degree, organizational psychology, something a bit more applied and practical. And then I joined a company in the UK called Sorota. It's actually an American company that was operating there. And I got into employee engagement work. And that's fascinating. It's really statistical work. It's really about understanding people at work, what they want, what they need, and looking at data about that. I moved through the ranks there, ended up running the team, put a business proposal in to sort of start the business in Asia, moved to Asia, to Singapore after doing a bit of a project. And then really just spent the next 5 years kind of trying to understand Asia, understanding people at work in Asia. Did okay, like grew that a bit. And then in 2016, we sold that business to Mercer. And I joined Mercer, and we sort of continue the journey from there. So it's been interesting learning really, about both working in a bigger organization, but also some of the other things that Mercer does around reward and incentives and talent and those sorts of things, but also they're bringing a lot of my expertise around organizational psychology, talent, engagement, culture to a lot of the work that we do. So it's been an interesting journey, but now I live and work out of Singapore, which is an amazing place really helping our clients on issues related to employee experience, engagement, and culture.
Lewis has had the good fortune to work across a broad range of industries with companies such as Shell, Rolls-Royce, Skype, Solvay, National Grid, Westfield, Royal Hold, and TNT, as well as a number of others. All organizations are looking to get the most out of their investment in their employees. So, what value does a thriving employee bring to the workplace? Lewis explains.
It's an interesting question because what's fascinating about that is that we even have to ask it a tool, right? Because if the idea that a thriving person wouldn't generate value is, if you think of the reverse, it kind of sounds a little bit absurd. But I think, during the industrial era, we really grew up trading off, maybe the well-being of people against our performance. There was this idea that, people were resources and we had to use them. And, a valuable person was someone who was willing to expend their energy in order to be able to perform at work. And, there was a cost in terms of energy if you wanted to be a high performer or someone who was doing a good job. And these days, I think what we've learned is that actually those things are not mutually exclusive. You can be someone who's growing, who's energized, who's excited to be at work, who's also doing well. And what we've recognized is that that's a function of leadership and culture and fit. Finding the right person, doing the right kind of work in the right kind of culture. Those people don't feel like work is effort. It's actually a pace that they want to be. So organizations get a lot from that because when we do that well, we find that people bring a lot of energy and vitality to the workplace with them, but also that they grow and they find that incredibly rewarding. And, that's not just opinion. That's what the science tells us. So we've become a lot more sophisticated in our understanding of what work can bring to people's lives and the benefit that organizations can get out of that.
So in your opinion, what would make work more meaningful?
I really like the sort of evolutionary point of view about, how people evolved on the plains of Africa and what really gets them excited. And what we've noticed is that no matter what human community you look at, everyone has an ideology, a belief, a set of stories that they find important. And those stories really bind them together. They make life worth living. They enable people to collaborate and, find meaning in uncertainty. And so sort of leveraging those ideas and the natural psychology of people at work, I think, there's a lot that we can do. People are naturally curious. They love learning. And, when they find out they're ignorant about something, often it's a very sort of rewarding experience to be like, wow, I didn't realize that. And for many people, that's sort of interesting. It's a stimulating thing. So finding a way to enable people to experiment and be creative, that's very meaningful. Belonging to something, feeling part of a community is important. So when people feel connected and feel like they belong somewhere, they often find that very meaningful. And actually, when you study experiences of meaning, it's often a very personal thing. Like you can't give meaning to someone, they have to find it themselves. And really often that's through an experience of connecting with others, either feeling an experience of belonging or helping someone else. So we experience a lot of meaning through our ability to connect with others. And then last, maybe, this feeling that you're important, that you have a role in the world and that someone values you. And that sense that you and the kind of status or importance that affords you. Everyone wants to feel they have purpose. And sometimes that comes through achieving something and feeling like, wow, I really did a great job here. And other times it just comes through simple recognition. So people find meaning in different ways. It's very personal, but of course, work and the stories that we associate with work is an important way, at least in the modern era, that a lot of people experience meaning. Belonging is important to people. I mean, just because of the way that we've evolved to find rejection, social rejection, very painful. Because if you think about it, if you were a part of a tribe and you were rejected by that tribe, the chances that you wouldn't survive are very high. We create a lot of stories around why it's important to be part of a group. And if you've ever read anything by Yuval Harari, anything around the success of humans as a community, why we're so dominant, one of the things we're really good at is creating stories, stories that enable us to connect as a group. And maybe in history it was an ideology or something, and in the modern day it might be something that's a little bit more related to the work that we do. So yeah, I think people have to find personal meaning, but they often find it in a story that's related to doing something that's valuable for a group of people.
Interesting. So in your opinion, what would be the benefits to modern day employees of having meaningful work?
Well, so health is one of them. So we find that when we study people, that their happiness and well-being is really correlated to something meaningful and to doing something meaningful. But what's interesting is that there's a real difference between the experience of meaningfulness and happiness. Doing something meaningful is very rewarding. Doing something that makes you happy is kind of satiating, and those are very different experiences. One of the examples I really like is actually more to do with family. It's people find the experience of having a family, having children, very meaningful. They find that it's an incredible experience. They learn a lot, that they are really contributing a lot to someone else's life. That's the definition. But that doesn't, I don't think they always describe that, or the research at least suggests they don't always describe their life as happy. It's challenging, it's difficult, but it's meaningful. And I think the difference between meaning and happiness, finding something you find meaningful and rewarding and something that makes you happy, it really tells us a lot about what people are searching for. And if you're constantly looking for something that makes you happy, actually that whole process of trying to find happiness is actually sometimes gets in the way of you doing something meaningful. So health, the outcomes of meaningfulness, health, happiness, connection, I think are all very valuable, but also, dedication, commitment, pride. Those are all things that are useful for businesses as well. Those are the kind of things that we want to see in people, and employees who experience those things are much more likely to sort of go the extra mile. Something that companies really want these days.
I've never actually heard it framed that way. So I've seen all of those studies that say parents have a lower net happiness score, or however that's measured. But I like the layering of meaningfulness on top of that. It's an interesting framing that I haven't seen. So thanks for that. Yeah. I know you said earlier that you can't really give people meaning, but what role do you see leaders as playing in the shaping of meaningfulness in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, so look, leadership plays a really significant role in the experiences that people have at work. There's loads of reasons for that. Leaders choose who's on the team. They decide what work gets done by who. They communicate what's valuable. They promote people, for example. So, it's the leader is a significant player in anybody's work life. But there are certain things that leaders do. So, for example, very curious leaders often get bored easily. They're interested in new ideas, and so they create teams who get the opportunity to experiment and try new things. And people find experimentation incredibly rewarding and meaningful. In the same way, very curious leaders are interested in other people, and so they encourage self-expression, and people find expression incredibly powerful and meaningful. Ambitious leadership is also very positive, because it enables you to constantly challenge the status quo. You get this constant sense of momentum. As long as it's demanding rather than demeaning, you find that people find working for an ambitious and a leader very, very positive. Leaders also set the cultural tone, so they choose people that fit in, and they also set the tone for trust in the team. And trust is really important because it's kind of the currency that people use for social exchange. So high trust teams and leaders who really know how to trust people find that people feel more empowered, work harder, are more willing to take risks and invest their energy in a business. So, there's a lot a leader can do, and a big role that he or she plays in helping people find meaning at work by their behavior and what they do.
From the leader's perspective, how do they know if their teams are finding their work meaningful?
Well, I mean, I think the best way to know is just through objective measurement. So if you have a engaged, productive, innovative, high-performing team, then usually those people will be finding their work meaningful. I mean, one of the big signs that perhaps you're trading off something is that if you have a group of people who are working really hard, but are burning out, you have high turnover, you're hearing a lot of frustration. Perhaps there's something in the way that you're leading them or the way that the work is designed that's getting in the way of you achieving that more sustainable balance. So I'm a big believer in sort of watching for objective metrics for outcomes. But another sort of more simple way is just employee feedback. So creating an environment where people can really tell you what it's like to work for you. And as a good friend of mine was saying, look, really effective leaders are able to generate high performance without making people miserable. Really effective leadership takes the well-being of followers into account, as well as the outcomes that and the success of the group.
In that light, are there personality characteristics that you think leaders have to make work, or that they need to make work feel more meaningful to their employees?
Well, so I think every leadership is idiosyncratic. So I think it's, everybody has a personal strength, but also problems. I mean, there are things that get in the way, I think, of people experiencing meaning at work, particularly for leaders a certain way. So unfortunately, there's always, well, I say unfortunately, there's always competition within a group for status. And that means that, a lot of leaders can get ahead, or many people can get ahead by being really focused on self-centered or individualistic goals. And if they do that, then sometimes they trade off the success of the group against their own personal success. And that really gets in the way of people being able to do the best work that they can and to feel good about the work that they do. So leaders who are sort of ambitious for the group rather than individually, who see it as their role to create a high-performing team rather than to make themselves successful. People who, and leaders who perhaps are even more balanced and sometimes boring, actually, emotionally mature, very stable. Those are the sorts of people who are able to take a view of, to sort of say, well, look, my role here is to help others do a great job. And, the best way to do that is to invest time in helping other people be a success. So, yeah, you tend to find consistent, emotionally stable, empathetic leaders tend to have teams that thrive.
Kind of on the flip side of that, do you think that leaders can create a kind of adverse effect on the motivation of them, potentially by putting in their own personal biases?
Yeah, so bias is a big topic because everyone has it, and it's difficult to sort of see, because you're inside your own body. It's difficult to see your bias if you have it, and people get really frustrated. In fact, actually, I was looking at some data that we collected. We survey a lot of people every year, and millions of folks, and one of the questions we ask is, for example, do you believe performance reviews or promotions are based on ability? And 50% of people say no. And that tells us a lot, that actually a lot of what leaders evaluate in who they promote and how they reward is really based on their personal opinion, their own view, their subjective evaluation of others rather than anything objective. And, again, a friend of mine says, wouldn't it be great to have a robot as a boss? Because, it would be objective. It wouldn't freak out if something went wrong. It would just, try to do its best to fix the problem. It would be consistent rather than erratic. And actually, when you're working with somebody who's very predictable, why they might not be the most exciting, they are usually much easier to work for and with. While we might kind of find the idea of working for this kind of boring, like the boring static, I don't know, sort of predictable leader as unattractive because it doesn't sound very entertaining. Actually, that person delivers on a lot of the other needs that you have at work in a far more effective way. It's sort of entertainment is for the movies, and if you're at work, actually, what you want is somebody who's fair, who's objective, and who can help you get your stuff done.
So, when an employee isn't thriving, what do you think a leader should do?
So, what's very interesting about the sort of power dynamics of teams and the way that hierarchies work is, I think sometimes it's difficult for leaders to see people who are having a tough time. And that's because people really censor themselves at work. They're trying to show up as best as they can be. So I think the first thing that a leader can do is to just be really open about the fact that they're willing to have that conversation. That if you're finding something difficult, it's much better to come forward and talk about it and to get support than to try and hide it. And that's difficult because many people feel like if they raise concerns with their boss, that they'll get called out, and someone will say, it'll be seen as a sign of weakness, that you're not resilient enough. So that's another thing that I find kind of amusing in modern day business, that we talk about the importance of resilience, and sometimes when I hear folks talking about resilience, it's kind of a proxy for what I want is tough people who don't give up and who can take the heat. But if the work environment is the thing that's causing the heat, if people are experiencing a negative or toxic environment, then really, it's the leader that needs to change. So being open, willing to have that conversation, paying attention to whether or not there is a good fit. So if someone's really struggling, then sometimes it's just because they're not a good fit for what they do, and figuring out how to help them, refocus their energy on stuff they're good at, I think is what great leaders do. And there was a great article in the HBR just a while ago around the idea that people don't quit their boss, they quit their job, but their job is something that their boss creates for them. And so actually, it's that fit between the work that you ask people to do and their capability that really gets them to feel energized. So thinking about fit, thinking about growth, making sure that there's an open conversation and that people can really come forward with their concerns, I think is the best thing that a leader can do.
So thinking of it outside of the leader-employee relationship, what do you think communicators do to help their organizations thrive? Or what can they do to help their organization's employees thrive?
So the first thing is that, really effective communicators bring brand and purpose alive for people. So sometimes we talk about it as activating the employee experience. So many people in an organization are just not really aware of some of the really amazing and great things that the company is doing, and making that connection and raising awareness and helping people sort of see how the community they belong to, how the organization they belong to, what it values and what it cares about and what it invests in, I think is a great way to help people see purpose. There's some really interesting research that shows that actually it's actually based on NASA. The sort of cliche story about JFK asking the janitor at NASA, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And the janitor saying, "Well, I'm helping to put a man on the moon." And it's the idea that those tasks really connect with a really higher purpose. Great communicators really help that to happen. Now, the problem is actually if your goal is so lofty and what the person is doing feels so disconnected from that goal, as in so transactional, so menial, it can actually have the opposite effect if you communicate like this big, lofty purpose, but the person doesn't experience it or doesn't see their role in it. So it's communication at multiple levels. It's not just saying this is what we're about and what our brand stands for and who we are, but also helping people at the team level or the manager level really make that real. That's what I think really effective communications teams do.
Do you see a role for critical experiences to help reinforce that messaging, to help shape an employee's connection to the organization?
Yeah, I mean, so employee experience is a big topic right now, and what is it? What's its what's its role in performance? How do we shape it? I think there are a few conversations there. So, what do people need? Who are our people? And employee-centric design, I think, is a really important and interesting set of ideas, because so many organizations grow up around doing things to people, like, we will do this to you, and it's sort of the idea that an organization demands things of its people, or that the people are lucky to have the organization to do something to them, versus designing around problems that individuals have. But then sort of identifying those things that really stand out and create emotional experiences that people remember and hang on to. And those stories that enable groups to connect with individuals. So particularly if you have an important transition, a milestone, something like that, and bringing brands of purpose to life in those moments, people remember that, and that really helps, communicate messages and helps people sort of connect to the bigger purpose of the company.
Thank you to Lewis Garrad for sharing his time and expertise with us this episode. If you want to learn more about his work, he offers many ways to stay connected.
Very active on social media, so you can find me on Twitter. It's my name, Lewis Garrad, just one word. That's my Twitter handle. You can find me on LinkedIn. Publishing a lot on there. A lot of conversation if people reach out to me there. I'm in Europe in a few weeks' time, presenting in Madrid at the European Association of Test Publishers, which is a psychometrics community there. And then actually, I think after that, the next thing I've got is in Canada, I think it's in Toronto, HRPA. So yeah, it's if anybody who's listening can see me at those things, I would please reach out. It would be really wonderful to say hi.
That's a wrap on Season 2. The entire Internal Comms Pro team wants to thank you for spending your walks, commutes, and treadmill time with us. We also want to thank this season's 15 wonderful guests for sharing their experience and insights with us. We are already brainstorming about Season 3. If you have ideas, let us know on our site or on Twitter, @InternalCommPro. Internal Comms Procast is produced by Super Awesome Media. Our executive producer is Rachel Foles. Gina Morvek is our associate producer and editor. Our theme music is Please Listen Carefully by Jawser via the Free Music Archive. Our intro music is Sea of Glass by Connor Sweeney. Thank you for listening.